Hi, this is the Magnificent Midlife podcast, and I'm Rachel Lancaster. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now is our time. My guest today is Dr. Cathleen Brown, and she is a board-certified obstetrician and gynecologist who has spent much of her career caring for female soldiers and their dependents. She was honorably discharged from the US Army after 12 years of meritorious service. She now provides telemedicine gynecology services specifically for women at midlife during the menopausal transition. Cathleen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's really nice to have you here, and I'm very interesting. I was interested to meet you. I was talking before we hit record. You are actually my first veteran to come on the podcast. I'm very excited about that. I had planned to have another veteran, and we had some technology issues and couldn't make that work. So you are my first. Welcome.
Well, I'm happy to be your first. Thank you so much.
So my first question is, what was it like being an army doctor?
Well, I have to say, I went into the Army with the plan for them to pay for my education. And I had a very idealistic view of what I thought I would be doing in the Army, as an Army physician. I kind of had this vision that I was going to be doing humanitarian work, maybe traveling around, doing those sorts of things. But really the bulk of what I did was taking care of female soldiers, helping manage periods for women, especially when they're going downrange, going to Afghanistan for 6 months, 12 months, and having to deal with their menstrual cycle, when they're in an austere environment like that. But also we took care of all of the dependent wives and children of the soldiers as well. So, I was able to provide full scope OBGYN services from period management to birth control counseling to young teens to delivering babies, but then also doing menstrual management and dealing with gynecologic problems, later in life, and menopause care, but also hysterectomies, really the full scope of everything. And I was stationed in several different places. So when I graduated from medical school, I did my residency in the Army at Tripler Army Medical Center in Hawaii, which was truly a wonderful experience because I had grown up in the Philadelphia area. All my family was in Philadelphia, and I had done some traveling, but never lived anywhere else really. And so that was just a cultural experience as well. Even though it's a part of the United States, it really kind of feels like you're in a different country because it's that Polynesian world and the Native Hawaiians. And that was a wonderful experience, working long hours and working hard, but then living in paradise. It was truly a gift. And then from there, after 4 years there, then I was in El Paso, Texas for 3 years, right on the border with Mexico. And so my Spanish got pretty good because we had a lot of Mexican Americans that we cared for there. And pretty much every Army hospital that I've ever worked at, we would take civilian emergencies too. So not only did we care for the soldiers and their family members, but often because we were a quality hospital in the area where they maybe didn't have the resources, we would take civilian emergencies that would come in as well. So we got to do some interesting things that way too. And then after Texas, I finished my career in North Carolina, just in Fort Bragg, which is a little bit east of the Raleigh-Durham area. And that's like what we consider to be the research triangle in the United States. So, and then I moved back to Philadelphia after I got out and to continue practicing. So now I not only do the telemedicine for GYN, but I also practice as an OB hospitalist as well. So I do inpatient obstetrics mainly and emergency GYN services. But I really missed caring for patients in the office, doing the inpatient side of things. And so, working for Winona, which is the telemedicine platform that I work for, has enabled me to really help women in that midlife portion of their lives, helping with menopause, helping with that transition. And it's really been a wonderful opportunity.
And just because I've never had a guest I could ask before, how do
service women manage their periods when they're on active service?
Yeah, I mean, there's medications we can give to suppress your period. There's several birth controls that you can take continuously so that you don't have a cycle every month. But here's the thing, it's pretty common. So like using a Mirena IUD, a progesterone embedded IUD, or we have progesterone embedded implant. Here it's called the Nexplanon. I don't know if it's the same in England, but also just birth control pills, taking them continuously. Sometimes they might get some breakthrough bleeding or spotting, but for the most part, they wouldn't get a full menstrual cycle. But here's the thing, when they're deployed and say they're on a mission and on a convoy of military vehicles traveling from one place to the next, you can leave no trace, right? So if a woman is on her cycle and she has menstrual products, she needs to carry those with her until she's back at a place where she can safely dispose of them.
Wow.
So can you imagine, like, every maxi pad or tampon you use in a day is in your cargo pocket or in the bag you're carrying. So they get creative. They use a lot of Ziploc bags. And actually, when the menstrual cups came out, the silicone menstrual cups, those were a godsend to a lot of soldiers because they could hold a lot more menstrual blood than a traditional tampon or pad could. And so it gave them a little bit more flexibility and freedom. But really now, like, having the option to manipulate the cycle with the hormonal birth control really gives women the freedom to kind of plan when they want to menstruate and when they don't, which can really help.
Wow.
So, yeah.
My goodness me, there you go. You see, there's always something to learn on my podcast. Wow, that's really interesting. It's difficult though, isn't it, that you've got to take synthetic hormones to, mess around with your cycle, but I can understand why you would want to do it, but it's
right.
It's another sort of thing that, women have to deal with rather than men having to deal with.
Exactly. Exactly. And although it does those positive things, of course, any kind of medication, there's side effects with it. And so one of the biggest things that we would fight with as far as our female soldiers was that a lot of the birth controls would cause weight gain. The synthetic hormones were not the same, not as natural as what your body was making naturally. And so, they would have weight gain, but then they had to, really be a certain physical appearance. Soldiers have to maintain the physical fitness standards.
Yeah.
While I was active duty, part of being a soldier, even though I was a physician and I was an officer and high ranking, I still had to submit to weight and measuring every time I had a physical fitness test. Oh yeah. So, there's like a height and weight chart, and if you're a certain height, you were allowed to weigh this much. And if you were over that, then they had to do measurements and calculate your body fat percentage. So some women using the menstrual regulation with the hormones would struggle with that, because if they gained a little bit of weight in response, then it gave them a challenge to try to maintain their physique as well. So
more things for women to deal with.
A lot of things to deal with. Yes, absolutely.
It's interesting for me because, in my lifetime, I've seen so many more women in these kind of roles. When I was young, it was so limited. So on the one hand, it's brilliant that women are able to do this sort of thing, but there's still quite a significant price to be paid, isn't there, to be able to do it?
I think so. Yeah. And only, each woman is the person that can really determine the risks and benefits for that in their life. But yeah, the caveat is having the freedom and having the ability to do these different careers. You do have a lot of other things that go along with it, for sure. Yeah.
So how was it transitioning into civilian life?
Well, for me, it wasn't difficult. I think for soldiers that really do a very military specific job, it can be very hard for them to transition to life outside. But as a physician, I was in the hospital. Often, I may wear my uniform into the hospital, but I would often change into scrubs when I got there. And so for me to go from working at a military hospital to working at a civilian hospital wasn't that much of a leap. I'd say the biggest transition struggle that I had was dealing with the medical insurance issues in the United States. So working for the government and being an Army physician, it's kind of like a socialized medicine, right? So If I ordered a test for a patient, all that they needed to know was that I wanted to order it and this is the reason, and the patient got it done. Now on the other side of things, now I'm having patients that can't afford their medication, that can't get a CAT scan that I order because their insurance doesn't approve of it. So there's so many more hoops and so many instances where patients really truly don't get the care they need because they're not financially able to pay for it and their insurance is not covering it. So in that sense, I do miss working for the government and having the ability to just do what's right for the patient because it's medically needed, and not having to worry about the financial aspects of things.
That was one of the things I was telling you before we hit record. I lived in America for 3.5 years, and that was one of the things that was a very big lesson for me. I'd always been very appreciative of our National Health Service, but living and working in New York and seeing the way the medical system was set up was quite shocking, actually, because we take it for granted over here. You know, we have long waiting lists, but we don't have to pay at the point of care, you know, unless we choose to. If we want to have private medical insurance, if we can afford it, then we can jump the queue. But the standard of care is still absolutely the very best in a National Health Service teaching hospital. That's where you're going to get the very best care. And we don't have to pay for it. Those decisions are they're not something that we have to grapple with. And yes, I know that, you know, now, oh my goodness, I remember, you know, were you going to see somebody who was in your network or out of your network? I remember that was the sort of language, you know, and you had to go and see different doctors for each different bit of your body. And there wasn't so much the idea of a general practitioner. I think that they do exist, don't they? But they're not. I mean, here we that's the first point of care, is you go and see your general practitioner, and then if you need to see somebody else, they will then refer you on.
Right.
I seem to remember you have to make some of those decisions yourself as to which bit of your body you need a doctor for, and then finding somebody who's either in your network or you have to pay extra if they're not in your network. And I remember spending so much time on my medical insurance. It was a bit soul destroying sometimes, actually.
It really is. And for the bulk of Americans, you know, their medical insurance is mediocre, you know, and if they truly have a significant health issue, they're going to have to pay a significant amount of money, you know, in medical bills, which is just, it's really sad. You know, we need an overhaul in our insurance system for sure.
I don't understand how one of the world's richest countries, if not the world's richest countries, still has this situation with medical insurance, that it is so, the level of inequity in the American medical system is just awful, isn't it, really? It just doesn't
really
make any
is.
sense.
Yeah, it really is. And that's, you know, part of the reason why, like the company that I work for the GYN telemedicine, it really exists because a lot of the women in the United States that are at midlife, going through menopause, can't get in to see somebody, or they can't find a doctor that's willing to prescribe or that's willing to help them. And so there's more direct to patient, you know, platforms and telemedicine becoming available for those patients, because we need another way. You know, we need a better way for women to navigate their care and to be able to care for themselves. So,
and I think the whole telehealth has become so much more accessible and acceptable, hasn't it, since COVID?
Yes.
We've realized that it can be done. A lot of it can't, but a lot of it can be done.
Absolutely.
Online, can't it?
Yeah. I mean, we did so many things online. Our children went to school online, and, you know, the medical appointments online. I think that it really gave us a lot more flexibility. So, you know, now you can have a doctor who's located across the country who can help you through a problem, you know, that may not need to be in your hometown even.
So what do you like now about helping women who are in midlife and grappling with menopause?
Well, I have to say I have a vested interest in this because I'm starting to go through that process myself. You know, I think that so much time and energy has been put into male health, especially.
Oh, yeah.
Not a lot of research is going into helping women. We've placed so much importance on erectile dysfunction and male sexual dysfunction, and not enough attention to women. And women were, for many, many years, expected to suffer in silence with a lot of issues. And, for some women, menopause can be a smooth transition, but for many women, it can be a very difficult time and a very tumultuous time. And so, I really feel like, my entire career, my whole goal is to just make life better, for another patient, especially when you meet patients all the time that have had a bad experience, or they go to see a physician who they feel like is not listening to them, or that doesn't take them seriously. And one of the most common complaints I get from patients now is that when they talk to their physicians, whether it be their primary doctor or whether it be their OBGYN, to tell them about the symptoms that they're starting to experience in their 40s and their 50s, they're told, oh, you're stressed out, you need an antidepressant, you need this, you need that. And they're thrown a whole bunch of pharmaceuticals without really dealing with what is the core of the issue, like what is happening. And it's really such a transition in hormones and the balance of hormones in our body that can affect every aspect of our life. And if it's not really addressed appropriately, it can be a very struggling time for a lot of women. So I think to me, I feel a great sense of reward to be able to listen, to be able to help patients that are struggling with this. But also I'm kind of going through the experience myself. So I'm also, omnivorous about reading and researching and learning as much as I can to help patients, but also help myself as well. So I think that, it's becoming more mainstream. I think not only, am I focusing on this and our company, Winona, is focusing on this, but, American football is, a big thing here. And
yeah, you had an advert, wasn't there?
For the first time ever, one of the Super Bowl commercials, which those are the most coveted advertising slots for any product in the United States, they had an advertisement about vasomotor symptoms, about menopause. I was shocked. I thought I'd never see that on primetime TV, and so the fact that it's even part of the dialogue and the discourse now, that it's huge. So.
But it was financed by a Japanese pharmaceutical company that has since launched a non-hormonal drug for vasomotor symptoms.
Right. Yeah, I think it's just, even though that's the source of it,
it's still positive.
Just bringing up the topic is a good thing. Yeah, opening that conversation, I think, is good.
But it's my sensitivity is because the same company, which has, I think, lobbied successfully in the US to get approval. It doesn't yet have approval here in Europe and in the UK. But we have an all-party parliamentary group which has been working on menopause here in the UK and did a report, and it was a report that was very heavily slanted towards hormone therapy. But it was and not lots of all of the other things which I'm very interested in. But it was that parliamentary group is also financed by this Japanese pharmaceutical company. I know, really? I know. So I'm sort of like, ooh, I don't like that, I don't like the fact that, an all party, so it's cross party, so it's supposed to be objective.
Right.
But it's being financed by a pharmaceutical company which has a vested interest in getting its own menopause drug approved in Parliament. Well, hey.
Oh, gotcha.
I know.
Well, yeah, certainly gives you pause,
I know. It does. With me, it does, because, on the one hand, yes, I'm delighted that people are talking about it, but I get a bit, okay, so who's saying what and why are they saying it?
So very true, because, it's got to affect how that process is going to transpire.
Yeah. And of course, this new drug, I think it's something like it's going to be $350 a month. I mean, who's going to be able to afford that?
Right.
I just don't understand that.
Yeah, the cost of medications is surely, a concern too.
So how can women help themselves in menopause?
Well, I think that the biggest thing that I see is that we need to move. I think that in this body that we have to treat our body truly like it's a temple, right?
Oh,
So
yes.
one of the biggest symptoms I have from patients that patients complain about is poor sleep, insomnia. But then when I talk to them about their habits and kind of what their routine is during the day, we're so inundated with screen time and on our phones and on TV.
We're switched on all the time, aren't we?
All the time. And the research has shown that constant stimulation from screens keeps you more alert, and it actually can interfere with that normal circadian rhythm. And so we're not helping ourselves when we're sleeping less. Optimizing sleep is so very important. Really optimizing your diet and eating a diet that's rich in whole foods and natural foods and not a lot of processed ingredients is very important too. I think that those two things go a long way, but also just staying active and moving your body and taking care of your body. Because as we age and as we go through menopause and we lose estrogen from every tissue in our body, it changes the way those body parts function. Estrogen is beneficial in every tissue in our body. And so when it starts to kind of seep out, our joints may get a little bit more stiff. Arthritis can take hold a little bit more. Our skin becomes a little less elastic and less supple. And so it's important to, really maintain movement, especially weight-bearing exercise to prevent against osteoporosis, osteopenia. So I think that those are the key things, like going back to basics. I tell patients when they go grocery shopping, especially in the United States, the bulk of the supermarket, in the center of the supermarket, are these aisles full of processed foods that are shelf stable for 6 months plus. And you got to think about it, scrutinizing labels, looking at every ingredient. If you can't pronounce it, you shouldn't put it in your body.
Yeah.
That's kind of my general rule of thumb.
Yeah.
So if you stay around the periphery of the grocery store, all the things that will spoil easily, vegetables, fruits, things that you need to eat in a timely fashion, they're not going to be stable for weeks and months on end. Those are the healthiest things to eat. Those are the best things your body can process.
So those are around the edge of the store, and it's the long life ones are in the middle. Isn't that interesting?
It's all marketing and lobbying, I think. Yeah. And they use a lot of interesting packaging too. I mean, there's a lot of, kind of manipulation of the American consumer. So when you look at a box of crackers per se, it says natural health food, 100-calorie pack. And immediately it's like trying to draw somebody in. But when you look at the ingredients, like there's nothing substantial or nutritious in the product at all. But yet there's no rules as to what they can put on the label. And so people really have to scrutinize what they put in their body.
I think that is actually really shocking. People are suddenly waking up to it over here, and the ultra processed food.
Yes.
And that anything with like more than 2 ingredients, or anything that has an ingredient that you wouldn't find in your own kitchen,
right,
is ultra processed food. And even our bread, our bread is ultra processed food, which I'm sort of learning all of these things, and I'm trying to think, well, what can I substitute this for? And what can I, and I even bought some, I read an article where somebody was talking about having swapped crackers for like corn crackers. And I found these corn, like they're like a rice cake, but they're made out of corn. And on the ingredients, it says ingredients, corn. I thought, it's just got corn in it. So I could buy that. So I've been experimenting with that, and they're very dry and tasteless. But if I put a bit of natural peanut butter on, then they're kind of all right. But there's been a program on what we have a program called BBC Panorama, and Panorama is always doing investigations. And the sort of movement against or awareness of the processed foods is building. But having lived in America and having shopped for food in America, I know it's like 10 times worse than it is here. It's awful. So much of your food is ultra processed. So much of ours is ultra processed. But I think it's even more so in America, and people just acknowledge that this is the food they're going to eat. And I personally believe that there are many things that lead to Western women especially having a more difficult experience of menopause now than I think we have in the past. I don't think it's just that we didn't talk about it before. I think there's a cost to modern life, and I think the ultra processed food is a huge component of that, because we know that it impacts health in all sorts of ways, whether that be heart disease or diabetes or
Right.
just, people being obese. Apparently, I think in the UK, we have the most obese people in Europe, in the whole of Europe, and that's pretty bad, really.
Yeah.
We're not very good when it comes to food. And then we have discussions about putting obese people onto drugs to stop the obesity. And I just want to go, no, just eat better.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give them more drugs to fix a man-made issue.
Right. Right. It's a vicious cycle.
It
really
isn't it?
Yeah.
So how can women access better food in America if they want to cut out the ultra-processed food?
I mean, the food is available. I mean, it's, now it's a consumer driven, really. Like when you go to the grocery store, buying fresh, organic, vegetables, produce, fruits, it's available, and there's more and more available that's becoming more affordable because there has to be a demand for it for them to be able to supply it.
Mm.
So, I encourage patients to have, a lot of berries, nuts, really lean meats and fishes and things like that.
Mm.
Really trying to eat more whole foods, less processed foods, but they're available. It's just that I think that the issue is that the cheapest food you can buy is the worst food for you. It's the mass-produced, highly processed things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it feels like certainly over here, it feels like a ticking time bomb. We're gonna end up paying for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think women are already paying for it with menopause. I think that is impacting how women experience menopause.
Yeah, I think it certainly can too. We're seeing it with the obesity epidemic here as well, and more patients are getting diabetes or dealing with obesity. And, the same thing here exists, as far as the trend of everyone going on weight loss medications. So everyone wants an easy fix, but they don't want to put the hard work in to actually take care of themselves.
I am always saying that.
Yeah.
People want an easy fix. They're not willing to do the work. So another thing that can really upset women, I think, and I often see it as an early sign of menopause, is anxiety and is mood changes. And if women aren't expecting these things, it can really concern them. What are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I have patients that complain about having a lack of focus at work, sometimes having difficulty concentrating. And the other thing in professional women, it seems like the more professional career, there's a sense of almost like an imposter syndrome too that comes into play as well. So, we have women that are very successful, that may be running companies, maybe CEOs, senior physicians, senior lawyers, suddenly doubting themselves, forgetting the simplest of things, having trouble organizing their tasks for the day or their thoughts and, how to prioritize things. And it's not that they suddenly have lost the capacity to do that. It's just that, with all of the hormonal fluctuations as we're going through this menopausal transition, it absolutely affects our neurotransmitters and how well our brain functions and our mental clarity. And so, it's something that it's a pretty common, experience of symptom. Patients describe it as a brain fog, that sometimes they don't even have memory of what they did last week. They can't focus on what needs to be done for next week. And that's a very, very common issue that a lot of patients complain of.
So how do you help women with that?
Well, I think the first thing naturally is to try to optimize their sleep and their well-being, trying to take care of their body. But if those minor changes, like if you can prioritize your sleep and help your sleep hygiene and you get better night's sleep, 7 to 8 hours a night, and it's still not improving, then we can always supplement with bioidentical hormones if need be. So if the problem is from the loss of estrogen and the brain functioning, adding estrogen back in can certainly be beneficial for that. I also very frequently recommend like magnesium supplementation for patients too. Magnesium can help stabilize that blood-brain barrier and help to optimize, neurological functioning too.
We give it to patients. I take magnesium for restless legs, but I didn't know it had a brain impact.
Yeah, we also give it to patients who have chronic migraines. It can be preventative against migraines as well. So, I think that if we all had a perfect diet and we ate every color of the rainbow on a regular basis, we would probably get enough magnesium in our diet to not need that. But, the truth is that we probably have to supplement because we're not getting the magnesium from natural sources like we could.
And I think, isn't there something, did I read somewhere as well? Is it magnesium or another vitamin or mineral that it's not in the soil in the same way that it used to be? Therefore, we don't get so much of it in the food that we would have got in the past?
I think so. And not only that, but in the ways of like agriculture and farming, the ways that things are grown now and the way that they prepare the soil, and the way that they take care of plants is so different that you don't have those natural nutrients like the way that they used to be. Say that when our grandparents were our age, things certainly evolve and change, but not always for the better.
Yeah. So what's your wish for women in midlife and going through menopause?
Well, my first wish is that every woman who has a concern or has a symptom has someone that listens to them. I think that's the very first thing. I think that so many patients come to me saying that like no one really has listened to them. They feel like they're crazy. Their symptoms are kind of ignored or belittled a little bit. And so first, having someone to listen, and then someone to be able to offer help or assistance, to a woman. But I also want women to feel empowered. I feel like everyone should be empowered with knowledge, learning as much about what's happening in their body as possible so that they can help themselves as well. Just telling someone to exercise and eat better and to do this is not having the same effect as maybe teaching them the specific effects that it's going to have in their body and the importance of why weight-bearing exercise is important, to protect their bone health as they age. So I think those are the biggest things. And I want women to feel that the midlife and that second part of their life is just as good as the first. It should not be a downhill slope. There's no reason that we should have to defervesce and not enjoy our life and feel the best that we can at any age. And I think that that's important, that we empower women to be able to do that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow, and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause, and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.